but you can.
I'll do the intro to you, and you intro Leo.
You got it. Go for it.
All right. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to Startup Con Live, Day 3. We're coming up to the end of our day quickly here, and it's been an amazing conference. Day 3 is all about Launch It. So, Day 1 was Dream It. Day 2 was Build It. Now we're on Launch It, and we're coming up to the tail end of that. We've had some amazing speakers and conversations that matter throughout the conference. And I highly recommend everybody, if you haven't seen it, to go back, watch the replays. And please do register on our website, www.startupconlive.com, to see the full schedule of all the speakers that we've had. And to please do register so you can learn more about upcoming conferences and get some of the bonuses that we're going to be offering after the conference.
Absolutely.
So it's my privilege and honor and pleasure to be working with these two folks up here, Leo Nofsky and Lori Webb. The three of us co-produced this event. We just met 2 weeks ago online here on Blab, and in 2 weeks we've put together this entire conference, which is impressive. I'm
with the help of
a little bit.
Zeph. With the help of Zeph
and Jonathan, who are our moderators and supporting. Props for Jonathan and Zeph. Keep it going. So now we're going to go into the art of a powerful pitch with Leo, but I'm going to first introduce Lori, who will introduce Leo. Lori is an entrepreneur extraordinaire herself. She had 3 simultaneous #1 bestsellers on Amazon.com. Go to Amazon and look up Lori Webb, and you can check out her books there. Also, Lori has interviewed over 300 entrepreneurs, has done a stellar job throughout this in pulling amazing speakers in and interviewing them, as has Leo. And I'll now introduce Leo, and I will get off and be at close hand if you need me. All right.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody who's in the audience. You're in for a treat. We have Leo Nofsky of Speak with Power. And this is just a wonderful follow-up to what we've been talking about with persuasion, negotiation, and just the whole conference of what do? You need to dream it, you need to build it, and you need to launch it. And in this launching aspect, the power of communication, the art of the pitch is one of the key things that you need to be able to do if you want to succeed as a startup, as an entrepreneur, as anybody. So Leo Nofsky lives in Seattle, Washington with his family, his 2 small children and wife. And he is a part of the Keiretsu Forum, which is the nation's, possibly the world's largest VC investor group. Angel investor organization. So he listens to about 10 pitches every, week. And so he has a little insight into what that would be. Just to follow up, Leo is originally from Russia.
Soviet Union, yeah. Sorry.
And now lives in, again, Seattle. So Leo, please, let's get into why this first, because I know how you love to talk about your why. How did you get into pitching? How did you get into the art of speaking? Why is this so important to you?
It's a great question, Lori. I'll start with the fact that my passion, what really drives me is that I want to transform the world, leveraging the power of words and ideas by teaching myself and others how to tell authentic stories and transforming the world in that process. Because what I've realized through the last 6 years of being an entrepreneur, which is what brought me to this coaching profession, is that the story that I tell about myself and to myself, and the story that I share with others, ultimately will shape my world and the world around me. So the story becomes a vessel in which data and feelings and information and relationship flow in. And so just like water going into a certain shape vessel, it will take shape of that vessel. Right? And if my vessel, it looks like this, then that'll take that shape. And if it's like this, it will shape that form. And if it's this, it goes that. And so the idea here is that what I realized is that data or information or products in terms of entrepreneurs that are trying to share knowledge is only as powerful as the connection that makes with the audience, the bridge to the heart and mind of the audience. And the way I got there is I had my own big idea. In 2006, I was a frustrated post-medical student who's been disillusioned with medicine because it's such a non-holistic, non-health-oriented process, and decided to branch on my own and invented a piece of fitness equipment. Now, many people have pipe dreams. Mine was just actually made out of pipe. And it was a fitness equipment for people with physical limitations. And the first thing that my wife said to me at that time was that I should go and join Toastmasters. Those of you who don't know, Toastmasters is an international organization, kind of a foundational training ground for communication and leadership. And I said, what do I need Toastmasters for? I'm not afraid of public speaking. And she said, yes, I know, Leo, but when you speak, other people are afraid of you public speaking. And she was right, as she often is. Because what I realized is while I was not afraid to stand up in front of others, I lacked the internal awareness of what mattered the most. Because I'm such an extreme extrovert, I was not introverted enough to learn what matters. And then I lacked the skill set because I thought that if someone doesn't understand me, I just have to speak louder. Has that ever happened to you guys? Right? If people don't understand, well, where is the street? Come on. So what I've learned from that, it was just my first introduction to communication. And as I started to learn more, I realized that this is not just a tool. This literally is the story as a module, as a vehicle, is literally the most powerful way to engage with others. In fact, I will make a statement that I believe that just as my lungs need air to breathe, to live, and my stomach needs food, my brain needs stories. I live through stories. And I'm arguing, Lori, that you live through stories as well. And so does your audience. And yet, every time I come in, most of the time that I come in and hear a pitch, especially about somebody's life's dream, and as it happened when I watch my recordings of mine, same thing. What do people talk about? What do people start to talk about, most importantly? Lori?
They talk about themselves.
Sometimes, and not so much. They talk about their product. They talk about the problem, the opportunity, the product, the product.
That's true. Yeah.
And
themselves, the product and service.
Yep. And very often people don't talk about themselves because there's an innate fear of not wanting to show off. And I'll address that in a little bit later. But this idea of it's not about I am, it's about my own experiences, of inviting people to see the world through my stories. The same way as if you think about the book that you liked or the movie that you enjoyed, it invited you to see a world through someone else's eyes. Stories don't have plurals. That's what I took, Aaron.
It's perspective.
Yeah, it's perspective. And inviting people to see it through that story, just like Chris Vaughn was talking about just previously, this thing, I am sorry, I can't do that, right? Taking responsibility, not this is not acceptable. It's taking this I am. Or those of you who are watching my interview with Eric, when I pushed him to ask to start speaking in I statements, he was able to give us nuggets of valuable information about what was his role versus his partner's role. And I've learned a tremendous deal just from that.
Well, here, I'm going to do this. You and I work actually in a similar field as well. So I work with speaking as well and with pitching. And I'm going to pull us into this question of how can we provide specific, tangible keys for our audience to deliver a powerful pitch, a la Leo Nofsky?
That's a great question. And what I'm going to tell you is there is a structure and there is function.
Okay, structure and function.
I'll give you structure first because it's very simple. And I suggest that you always start with a story.
Right.
Start with a story. And START is an acronym because I love acronyms. That's kind of my little everything. And so there are 5 parts to any story. First, there is a setup. Next, there is tension. Then there's action. Then there is resolution. And finally, there is a takeaway or a transition, depending on where in the story you are. So setup, tension, action, resolution, takeaway, or START for short. And
if Frank or Jonathan are in the chat, would you please pull up Leo's blab from the other day when he did that presentation? Because he talks about SMART. He talks about that with one of the students. So
yeah,
you could link that in there.
And you can also go to my website, speakwithpower.net, and I will get you some of that information as well. But yes, so the structure, the acronym is mine, but the structure is not mine. It's specifically once upon a time and every day until one day, and then until finally, and then live happily ever after. Sounds familiar? Right? Yeah. Next, I'm sure everybody will watch next week. We'll watch Star Wars. Guess what? You will find setup, tension, resolution, takeaway, tension, action, resolution, takeaway. And then if you look carefully enough, in the part of tension, you will find inside the tension, you will find setup, tension of the tension, action within the tension, resolution within the tension, and there will be some kind of a transition into the action in this story. It becomes kind of like a fractal where you can go granular or you can get a story within a story. But the structure does not change. And what I find as far as pitching is concerned, where people miss what's missing most of all is tension. What happens is there is maybe some kind of a setup, usually not enough to get people's attention, like hook them, but there's usually some setup. And then there's action. Let me tell you what we've done or how good it is or how bad it is, but there is no real tension to create. And so any story is only worth, any spring is worth its weight only when it's pulled apart. So creating that tension, and my guest, Jack Fecker, yesterday talked about tension in terms of setting goals. Same thing. The more tension you create, where people say, come on, that is a problem. How am I going to deal with this? Right? Armin with Frank was doing that. And I was like, just tell me what to do. Until you set that dynamic up, you have no story. Okay. So,
and why is that so important for engaging the startup community?
It's engaging. It's critical because what it shows is it shows your process and your thinking, not just the answers. Because as a startup, you don't have all the answers. That's the point. And so when people come in with full sense of arrogance or full sense of confidence, it does not create sense of confidence in the investors. It does the opposite. One person there was 2 weeks ago, we were at Kretzer Forum, and there was a really slick presenter, just wonderful, good presenter. And they left and we were all talking about it, the pros and cons. And one person said, okay, the presentation was so good. I was wondering, where are the problems? Like, I don't trust him. I don't trust him. So the tension is the most critical piece here. And then the other piece is taking the action, the step-by-step things that I do relatively to a minimum, because the purpose of a story is not to feed people, but to make them hungry. The purpose of any pitch, which is usually 10 minutes long or less, is not to feed people all the detailed information. Is to get them to say, okay, you got me, I'm interested, let's talk more. Rather than, I have 2 hours worth of content, I only have 10 minutes, let me go really, really fast.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're trying to get, when you go to the bank, you're not, or when you're looking to speak with someone, you're just trying to get to the next level, the next step. You're not trying to to finish the whole game.
That's right. It has to be for a clear purpose. So to speak with power is to have an authentic story, what I'm suggesting, with a clear purpose that engages the hearts and the minds of a specific audience in order to ignite their thirst for knowledge, not to dump knowledge like knowledge dump that happens in most presentations. So
okay, so let's start with,
yeah.
I'm gonna use Frank's term. Frank, you're gonna love this. It's holiday time and I'm doing some unpacking. How would you define authentic story?
So that's where, so I talked to you about form. Now let's talk about function, because like any tool can be used for good or bad. Authenticity is, what is authentic is, I told you what the story is. Authenticity is an interesting one, and that is vulnerability. Vulnerability, trust, and courage. So when I define authenticity, I talk about vulnerability, trust, and courage. And so courage is willingness to act in spite of fear and pain for a larger cause. That means that there is a larger cause to be had. And sharing that cause creates authenticity, a feeling of authenticity, and people say, okay, this guy is for real, or I trust him. And communicating that. And in a pitch, it's challenging to do because the typical thought process is, I got to tell them about how my product works. I got to show them the nitty gritty and the promise and the traction and all that. And that is true. But the first and foremost is to show that I can trust you when you talk to me. You have to set up credibility. And that brings me to that point of vulnerability. I've once asked, I was getting a virtual assistant, and I asked a question. Tell me about the mistake that you've made and how you dealt with it, what it meant. And half of the people applying for the job said, I haven't made a mistake. And I said, oh my God, I do not want to talk to you at all. Or in case of Eric, when Eric today was talking about his first startup, in the original pitch that he did for Keiretsu, he did the most incredible job. And then at the end of the pitch, someone asked him a question, tell me about that last startup you had. And he said, well, I took a $30 million company and investment and made a $40 million company out of it. Right? And I've learned a lot from it, which is where all of my goals and ideas are coming from for this. So he ended on a really loud note. It was powerful, it was vulnerable, but it was the wrong order. He did it at the very end and did not set up credit, because that actually builds credibility. So it's counterintuitive, but authenticity is vulnerability and trust, trusting in the audience and knowing your audience, and then being courageous enough to share it.
Interesting. And
it's counterintuitive, but think about it this way. Think about people in your life that you consider to be authentic, or TED Talks that you heard that were authentic. It always starts with failure. Not always. It doesn't start with failure. There's a point of vulnerability and failure.
Well, I'm not going to get into a discourse on authenticity with you, but we have we could easily have a long discussion about what that means. But in the interest of also time and also sharing what you have so much knowledge, Leo, about, I mean, I saw your presentation that you did. I put the link in there, and I like your SMART model. I like, you're talking form and you're talking structure, right?
Function.
Form and function. And so if we talk about those things, if you share perhaps the moments, like, since you go through 10 pitches every single day, so how do you do that? What's the level of pitching in Seattle at this point? Are people usually prepared? Are they not prepared? Are do you guys have a certain template? Do you believe in templates? What do you, like, if people have to, there's a whole lot of questions.
Great question. So let me be very specific. There is a typical template concept that I've seen again and again in angel pitching. So there is angel and venture capitalists, and they both give you money, but they're completely different animals for very different sums of money. Angel investors are usually individuals with means, and they usually get together, like Kratzer Forum is a group of these individuals who are accredited investors, which it has its own designation. And they get together so they can minimize the risk, and they listen to a lot of pitches. The Shark Tank is a bunch of angel investors. That's who they are. Venture capitalists are a very different animal. They're institutional things, and so their pitches are very different structure. The angel investors, typically there is a 10-slide rule where you have 10 PowerPoint slides if you use PowerPoint. And then the idea of there is a general structure of you come in, you mention the pain, you introduce yourself, you mention your pain, and you talk about the solution. So the problem, solution, and then traction, and then projections, and then team, and then the ask. Those are the five basic steps of a traditional pitch. I am a bit of a contrarian in the way that I think that following the same structure like that, just the fact that everyone else does it should give you a pause and say, I don't want to do that.
Right.
It also separates I don't feel it to be the most effective tool. I actually like the Shark Tank model more than any other that I've heard, which is, hi, my name is Leo Novsky, and I'm seeking $300,000 on a $5 million valuation for 15%. I told you exactly what I want and the size of my dream, right? And what I have is, and I have a 30-word pitch of what it is that I do, what I'm solving. And then I go into a story of what it does or how I've come to it, because it creates the connection. And then I'm suggesting to allow the key questions with the slides to back it up to be part of questions, because these questions will inevitably come. So I'm a bit of a contrarian. So one of the things that I see is a bunch of passionate entrepreneurs boring the hell out of investors.
A group of people who might give them money or not.
And everybody is bored. No one is inspired. Not everyone is bored, not over, but very often, unless you have people like Eric who come in and start with that authenticity, and I could trust them, because the biggest mistake that I see entrepreneurs make, bar none, is entrepreneurs come in thinking that they're there to sell their idea. That is not the case.
Okay. What are they there to sell?
They're
Leo,
there.
Tell us.
They're there
Tell us,
to
Leo.
sell themselves. It's a freaking job interview. Okay?
That's right.
Because there are 3 questions that need to be answered. Only 3. Okay? Is this a good idea? Is the market ready for it? Is this the right time? And are you the right team
Exactly. To bring it
to bring it to market? And the worst thing that an entrepreneur can do is to answer the first 2 questions really well and the third badly. Because what that means is that, wow, yeah, that is a good that's a good idea. Yeah, this is the right time for it. I don't trust these guys. Who do I know who can actually steal that sucker from them and do that better? Okay.
Yeah.
I asked a venture capitalist and an angel investor the same question, and they both came up with the same answer, by the way. I say, what's most important to you as you listen to these pitches? And he said, traction beats team beats product.
Yeah. That you guys should write down.
Traction
beats. And
team beats product.
Yeah.
And yet.
And Leo, could you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's really good. So when you're saying traction beats team, what do you mean specifically?
When in Sancerre, Lucas Svek, who is one of my clients, came in and said, I went on Kickstarter and I raised $800,000 by selling 500 of these units right off the bat before they were even built. That's called
right. Okay.
Wow. Right.
So would that be, in other words, what would you say? Is that proof of concept, proof of interest, market
it's
analysis
validation
or research?
Yeah, we talked about validation with Eric. There are different kinds of validation, and you can use them as a tool. I can use them as a tool. Whichever one I have, I want to find. So people tend to hide their traction at the very end when they've already lost their audience. Okay, so traction is the first action that I talk about. But before that, people have to trust you. They have to. Team is more so. In the presentation, people spend most of their time talking about their product. Second, talk about their team, perhaps, and maybe talk about their traction. But the team is ultimately what's most investable. And the one thing that startups lack is traction. That's why they're called startups. So even the successful ones are there not to receive an award. They're asking for help.
Yeah.
And they're asking for not just money, but money and people and knowledge, right?
And was it your interview with Clayton when you guys were actually discussing this idea? It was kind of a parental analogy, and he was saying you can't expect to be, run if you're in the toddler stage. You can't expect your company to be reacting like a teenager or
that's right.
Something like that.
Crawl first, walk and run. And so many pitches start with, let me show you how we run. Ultimately, it ends up with a stupid hockey stick that everyone expects and no one believes, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is that what I'm suggesting, these are specific tips for you, is that identify the weaknesses in your own story, bring them up front to establish credibility, authenticity, and then they say, oh, so if he comes clean for that, I can trust him. And you can then pivot them into an action, into a takeaway, because the takeaway, so the two most important parts in this START model is tension and the takeaway, because the call to action, you got to get them to do something, right? So basically, I have a problem and you have the answer to my problem and I have the answer to your problem. Let's work. That's the ultimate foundation. So what I'm suggesting, rather than focusing out of 10 minutes, I would say no more than 3 minutes of that has to be on product. And people will go ballistic listening to me. They're like, what do you mean? I spent 2 years, blah, blah, blah. 10 minutes, 10 hours is not enough. And I'm like, that's the point.
Yeah. Well, the product will change as well.
Now you hit it on the that's the other piece. Because entrepreneurs, startups, successful ones, they pivot and they pivot and they pivot some more. And when you come in and you lock yourself, and when I come in as a speaker, as a pitch, and I come in and I lock myself with this product, it's just like what Chris said. If I lock myself, argue with the external environment, I limit my options.
Right.
At the end of a pitch, I want the venture capitalist or angel investor to come to me and saying, you're missing a point. This is what you should be doing. Or have you considered this? Or wait, you didn't cover this. I need to talk to you more. That's not a failure of a pitch. I've succeeded. I hooked them emotionally because they're so easy to say, yeah, good idea. Nah, it's not I can't see myself in it. Many people, many investors go that way. I'm a software guy. I'm a hardware guy, or I'm a distribution guy. This is not my piece. So I've put myself in a box, and then they put me in a box, and we're all sitting in our boxes, and nobody is moving. What Eric did is he got people to start thinking, oh, and the most successful pitches, they always do this. There's like, wow, I could feel it. I could feel it. Another pitch I really loved recently was a dental tool that uses water, no drill, high water with some additives to it to literally cut into the tooth. Saves pain, time. It's just, and the pitch was okay, but what he did really well is he said, imagine sitting in the chair, and everybody said, and so for the rest of the time he talked, and I looked around the room, and everybody was just thinking one thing. They're like, I want this at my own dentist chair. That's it. That's all they thought.
That's right. That's right.
And it was a universal pass. Let's go. Let's get him in front of investors, and he's going to get his money.
Right. It sounds also like your interview yesterday with Jack. I mean, his pitch on the bread line, right?
A picture.
Right? 10 different 10 different
unique ideas.
Ways.
And that brings me to another really important tip. And I learned that from I'm trying to remember. Leading Out Loud is a book that is kind of like my Bible. Leading Out Loud by Terry Pierce, and then there's and the tip that I have is what's called a New York tip. You know, Frank Sinatra sings New York, and the line goes, "If you can make it there."
Yeah, if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere.
Right? You can make it anywhere. What it means in this case is I can prove to you that I can do this and I can do that and I can do this. And it's going to take all this time and it's going to try to hit your head. Trying to get you to yes. Okay?
Right.
Forget it. If I tell you one story, a New York story, if I could show you how I can, as a speech coach, how I can help a defense lawyer who's totally unused to being in the courtroom, overcome conviction of an immigrant who was wrongfully detained by saying one phrase over and over and over again. That's a New York story. Man, if he can do that, he can help me with my pitch. And but I didn't tell you what to think. You thought it yourself. So that's the power of a story. You want to show a specific small story, very narrow, very focused, that shows you how your process works. So then when other people think about it, they can see themselves in it.
You want to really illustrate it.
You see yourself through it, not my story. You see yourself.
Okay, I'm going to pull you into something that I also really enjoyed about your presentation, and I think is helpful for this episode of Startup Con Live. The art of the powerful pitch has to deal with, I mean, my experience has also been with pitching. It's something I suffer from like greatly myself. And it's, you talk about how to present yourself, how to pitch yourself in 30 words or less. You actually have a beautiful pitch on that product or that service or whatever. So why don't we do that? So
sure.
What is it that you actually say about that?
Well, I say
about
that
extraneous words.
Yeah. So what I say is that as someone who is passionate about communication, I help business professionals and entrepreneurs overcome anxiety, underconfidence, and oversharing.
Exactly.
That derails communication by teaching simple storytelling tools to connect to the hearts and minds of the audience and reach the results that you want.
Right.
So that's 30 words.
Yeah, it's clear. And why 30 words and not 30 seconds?
So the 30 words and not 30 seconds, because my human psychology is if I give somebody a time limit and they have a lot to say, what's going to happen? Right? There are two things going to happen, right? Either
they're going to go fast.
I don't have enough time, so I'm just an engineer. Right? Here's a box, put me in it, and the rest of the conversation is dead. Or they go into, oh, I have so much to say. Well, at first I was born, and then I went to high school, and then for my first career was this, and like 5 minutes later, nobody's listening. So you're bored, they're bored, everyone's bored. What I'm suggesting with introduction is that it becomes a seed from which you can build the whole story. So from 30 words, which is ultimately with the normal cadence, is about 15 seconds. You can give that the idea of like setup, tension, action, resolution, and then give them connection to why it matters. So this is what I do, and this is why it matters. So, and what I suggest is if you create a 30-word introduction, which is much harder than the 30-minute pitch, the only difference between 30 words and 30 minutes is populating, building the stories around it. So I help business professionals and entrepreneurs is my setup here. I set up on who, not what. Right? Who do you help? Who does your business help?
Yeah.
And then I give them tension. This is the problem that they face, or people like you face: anxiety, underconfidence, and oversharing. And somebody who is listening to this, put in which of those 3 words strikes a bigger chord for you: anxiety, underconfidence, and oversharing. Which one of those 3? So we'll see what happens. And then I say I actually gave you the older version, but now I say I leverage the power of words and ideas, right? Because it's always overshare. Exactly, oversharing. People saw themselves oversharing, and they'll go like, oh, right? So this idea of pain is critical before you give solutions. Give pain, and most pitches revolve around giving lip service to pain. Here's the pain, and this is what we do. And so, and when I say I teach simple communication skills, or I leverage the power of words and ideas, it doesn't give as much detail as elicits curiosity.
Exactly.
Right. And then I say
and that's the power of the pitch.
And that's the power of the pitch. The purpose is not to feed people information, is to make them hungry. Get their imagination going. Another big mistake on the other end of not talking about yourself at all is the I am great. We are great. We have created a revolutionary product. It could be used sometimes, but at the end of it, that's a shortcut. When I say that, I want others to think that. So I just tell you what to think. How often have you personally, Lori, have been told what to think, and you're like, oh yeah, sure. I won't.
You're right.
Yeah.
Right. Let me change that. You're right.
Whatever. Right. What you want people to do is you want them to think that. So don't say it. You want them to think, oh, wow.
Well,
this is a really stellar team. So rather than saying we have a stellar team, all right, right? I have a person.
You can do. Yeah. It's. I want to ask you, because in my experience, I think that the challenge is that it's something to do with culture as well, because in some cultures it's even worse to say that, oh, we're great. In others, like you're in the States, I'm living in Europe, so it's even worse in Europe. You definitely are not supposed to stand up and say you're great. In the States, it's so populated, people have been raised to do that. It's an American bravado. However, the challenge, or the question is for you, Leo, is have you not encountered situations where people, they need to express what they're doing because they want to give you context. So context is everything. In my opinion, context and perspective are really the keys, because you could walk in there and, like, when people are saying, hey, we're really great, right? My best example is in Denmark, they downplay things. I have often been in a room talking to people who might be Olympic level sports figures, who say, where the comment is, oh, and I skate. Or yes, I like in the States, you're number 1 in high school and you're like, I'm really great at, like I'm a super skater. And then you find out you're sitting next to a hopeful who's like, yeah, I skate. Oh, you skate? Like, you mean you have a silver medal? You skate? So that's what I mean about context, because sometimes you lose credibility. If you're in a room with people who are raising 10 million, 20 million, $30 million, while $1 million, raising $1 million is nothing to scoff at, everything is relative. You don't want to go in there like, yeah, we made all this money, we're so great. And people are like, you made 1 million? Congratulations, you're just getting started, my friend.
Right. It's like,
so you gotta.
So yeah. So you bring 2 really awesome points here, Lori. One of cultural differences, and I'll address that because it's a really important one. And number 2 is this idea of downplaying versus overplaying. And I would say that losing credibility, both of them are just as deadly. And different cultures, there's something called, I teach a course called Lost in Translation, Cross-Cultural Communication.
Yes.
And so one of them, there's something called Hofstede, I think it's a Danish name.
Gert Hofstede. No, he's Dutch. I've interviewed him.
The Dutch, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dutch,
Dutch.
Yeah.
Gert Hofstede.
Yeah, amazing,
Hofstede.
amazing stuff. If you guys put it up, there are 5 different scales on which Hofstede scales of culture. And so as an individual, I fall somewhere on those 5 within my culture. But then if I were to come into another culture, I would map completely different on theirs, right? I used to live in Japan. And in Japan, the rebels, right? The rebels, they can't live there because it's a very conformist country. They move to America and they are very conservative. The rebels are conservative by our standard, or shy by our standard.
Right.
So the idea is, this is why it's critical to understand one's audience, whether it's a customer or investor or a teammate, and to understand their story, and then to create a story that matches theirs, but while being authentic. This is not about being like them. It's about being yourself, but with vulnerability, and asking questions rather than creating statements of either worth or discounting oneself. Because there is not just cultural, there's also gender difference.
Yes.
Women in general, as in US, with my female clients, it's constant. Oh, this is nothing. Oh, we just do this. Oh, I just done that. Half of my time is spent convincing them they're actually to believe in what they've accomplished themselves. And men have trouble asking for help or directions, and they say, I am great, I am the best, I don't need any help, until they do, and it's bad. So what entrepreneurship journey has done for me is that it helped me face my own bullshit. It really is. It's been an incredible journey in that I had to figure out where my ego is taking advantage of me, and where I am not, I'm just afraid. And one of the greatest lessons I've learned is when I'm afraid, or just say I'm afraid, or I'm nervous, but it's not showing it, just owning it. So statements of I am usually, or we are usually discredit, typically, unless it's a data point. Like, we have built this for this. Like, if it's data, if it's true or false, sure, because I didn't do something myself. But anything else, a story, we feel, we think, we do. I've never met a we who thinks, do, or anything. So by using, that's the thing. So your point is understand culture, and then tell a story.
Understand context and perspective.
Yeah, context. Right. Tell a story so they figure it out. They say, oh, so for example, your example of Olympic medalist or whatnot, right? You don't have to say, I am an Olympic medalist and I am a great skater. All I have to say was, when I was in Beijing at the Olympics, I was amazed at the number of blah, 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 blah. And everybody made that connection.
Seating.
Yeah, it's seating, right? And it brings that to specific time and place. So stories, the pitch should have at least one story when there was a specific time and place, usually when the idea happened. That's what brings the audience in. And that's what hooks them. And that emotion, I cannot overstate. Well, I am overstating it by doing that.
You can not overemphasize.
I want to emphasize. My problem is I exaggerate, and that decreases my credibility. So I just caught myself on that. It's true.
The cobbler's children have no shoes, Leo.
The cobbler's children always, and by noticing in that, gives the cobbler credibility. And that is really powerful. And that is the hardest lesson to learn. By being vulnerable, I can create more connection and more trust and more willingness for people to help me than if I am to say, I am great, this is how much we've done. And there's time and place for it. But what's missing most of all is this vulnerability and tension.
Yeah, there's a distancing. Obviously, because of the fact that I think it also is again, back to this whole cultural thing, and especially for men, that if you are made to think that it's a badge of honor to be, oh, I do so much. I'm so, I can manage everything. Your whole marriage could be falling apart. You could be getting ready to lose your house. I say this because I worked with there's an organization here in Denmark. It's called Early Warning. And we did a conference for Nordic Startup here actually it was last year. And we talked about failure. And it was brought up during that conversation or during that session that they were saying there's a disproportionate amount of actually not disproportionate. There is a lot of men who actually commit suicide because of failed startups, because of this pressure. So this is why I think it's kind of crucial what we're talking about, why vulnerability is an important thing to keep pushing in society. And in the pitch way, that when you come out, when you're open and you're able to connect with people like you're saying, Leo, that makes everyone relax, because also, men, the bravado will come up, the testosterone in the room. If one alpha male comes in and starts, pounding his chest, the rest of the alpha males will pretty much by default start doing the same.
And what happens with women? So there's this piece of, and when women come in, they constantly undervalue and if you're a female entrepreneur, which there are amazing role models out there.
Absolutely.
It's a critical part not to get undervalued, your company undervalued or not, because especially when you have men sitting and judging you. Obviously, this cannot be covered in 1 hour or 50 minutes, but I wanted to plug a couple of things. You mentioned authenticity in men, and men, by the way, have the 4 times more likely to commit suicide, partly because they're fine until they're not. And they also 4 times as likely to have heart attacks. And that's because their heart breaks because they don't know how to reach out, create community, create a team like what we're doing here. Exactly. One of the great, for me, I just put a link in, an organization for men in your life that could be incredible, that has helped me figure this out in many ways. It's Mankind Project. And it's in 9 different countries. It literally formed my life and helped me retell my story. And as we wrap up here, if you want to know more, I am actually doing a workshop online called Speak with Power Academy. And I just put a link out there. It's an 8-week online course that is going to start in January 11th. And I'm going to give away 1 seat from the people who are registered for this conference. And if you are interested in it, connect, see it. This is an iterative process. The story will change who you are. So authentic story, that authentic, powerful pitch, will, if it's right, my powerful pitch transformed who I am. It reminds me of my better self. Because I'm not always that way. And so
it's also, it's like what you were talking with Jack about yesterday, right? Advertise to yourself. So if you're telling a good story about yourself, you're advertising to yourself.
Advertise it. Those of you, and put that, we keep talking about Jack, put that link up, Becoming a Creative Entrepreneur. Jack Thacker is 84 years old. I had
Leo's mentor.
Yeah, my mentor out of Seattle. And yeah, everyone should have a mentor, and an amazing storyteller. So so what I want to leave people with is this, that in your pitch, there are structures that you could use, but at the end of the day, it's about credibility and authenticity. Create credibility, build it by showing vulnerability, and you will create engagement with the hearts of the audience, and that is where the commitment happens, because minds makes a decision, but it's the heart that makes the commitment. Right? The mind focuses on the price, the heart has the strings to the wallet. Which one do you want? And so this idea of connecting authentically with yourself and others, with myself and others, is what I'm really about, and how you pitch.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're ready to actually start transitioning with the countdown. And this is good because we're talking about authenticity. We're talking about vulnerability. We're talking about also the good, the good of the world, essentially. And I am on with my next guest in minutes. They're going to be meeting with me from Singapore. I think they're both in Singapore right now. Masami Sato is Japanese. Her husband is Australian, I believe. They live in Singapore and have an organization called Buy One, Give One, which is a model that Masami came up with, which is transactional based giving. And that's a really important thing to be considering when you're starting up. I believe very wholeheartedly in starting well, not just if you're going to start your business in 2015 or beyond, then you should be starting responsibly. The world has too many problems to just start making more junk to put in the world. So this is going to be
it's going to be amazing. And I think that really comes full circle, where the idea of authentic story is not just, the purpose of an authentic story is not just to self
gratifying
gratification. It really is transforming the world.
Agreed. Yes.
So that is where, so taking it the next level of authenticity is really bringing that authentic story into the world. And that's what you're going to be talking about, which is absolutely critical. Let's head down there. Frank, I see you've gotten
Frank's
into
already,
Merry Christmas.
You're a little early, Frank.
A little early, yeah. This was, I was saving for the after party,
my friend.
My son
getting ready for the after party.
All right. Well, I'm going to make sure my guests are going to be greeted.
Go for it,
so I'm going to go
close out here.
Okay. Thank you, Leo Nofsky, for sharing your wisdom about pitching from an authentic place and being powerful. On learning how to speak with power.
Thank you very much. Take care.